Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's web session where we'll be covering a lot of case studies around xAPI. So, if you want to talk about today's session in the social media realm, you can use the hashtag xAPI Cohort, tag xAPI Gnome, and we'll reshare those tweets. And then you can tag our presenters today, which is Art Working Teen, Art Working Teen, and Duncan Welder, who are right there. Hello. And we will get started right now. So today is our 8th web session. I can't believe that we are nearly 2/3 of the way done with cohort this semester. Seeing lots of great progress in the teams and excited to hear some team updates today as well. Right now, we are at 864 people registered for cohort. That's about 20 more people than last week. So again, I want to put out the disclaimer that it's never too late to join cohort, and folks could be joining your teams at any point. So if you're missing or need some help or need some new folks to review some things, please consider including them and also helping to catch them up on where you're at. Today, as I shared, we'll be having some case studies share out from Art Working Teen and Duncan from Risk. And they will be sharing a lot of great case studies for us to learn about how xAPI looks in the field and how you can actually use that. If you're a presenter for your team, I'm going to ask for you to share in the chat right now that you're presenting today so that our producers can make sure that you're unmuted and ready to go when we get to the team updates at the end of the session. So if you're presenting out for your team, please let us know in the chat which team you're going to be presenting for. I am Jess. Again, I'm the host of xAPI Cohort, and I have here with me today Aaron and Jamie, who are producing behind the scenes. So if you need any support on tech, be sure to tee them up. So cohort is, like I said, 2/3 of the way done. We've officially gone through and learned what xAPI was, how to send data from e-learning tools, how to send data from things that are not e-learning tools. We learned a lot about the LRS and the learning ecosystem. We've learned about making the business case to get buy-in for xAPI. We've learned about getting improving your statements and using xAPI profiles in order to share that better data. And we've learned about the LXP and our full learning ecosystem. Now we're in the part of cohort where we're seeing lots of case studies. And today we have two very well-known and thoughtful presenters and big fans and friends of the xAPI cohort. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being here every semester, Art and Duncan. And I'm excited to pass it over to you to share out more.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Let's see if we can share our desktop here. You want to?
All right, sure.
Oops, I'll switch it. Go ahead.
Thank you. Let's see, like just mentioned, we're going to take a look at some various case studies. Now I'm going to tell you right up front that only one time have I ever had a client come to us and say, I want to do this with xAPI. And I told him that was not the right path to go. And he convinced me otherwise. We'll talk about that case study. But we're not going to spend much time in this actual slide deck. What I wanted to use it as is really kind of a jumping off point and introduction for these different challenges. So this is us. I'm going to grab contact info or Twitter info. Always glad to have that. The first challenge that we ran across, or the first one we'll talk about, is that a group that came to us. They had about 6,000 employees working all over the U.S. They didn't really have anything outside of the states. They hate their LMS, but are kind of tied to it. So not at a point of making a change. They're trying to push training out that is mobile focused, right? So they're using Rise as an authoring tool, and they're multi-module courses. So each piece is 5-7 minutes, but laid out primarily for a phone screen. Now they're doing both leadership and safety training, so reporting is critical, and they were already working with SCORM, but came to us and said, how do I send a text message to someone that bypasses the LMS and launches content on my phone? So a couple things, employing xAPI to do this, right? First, I said, we need to change from SCORM content to xAPI or CMI5. Right? So I want to be able to send an embedded token when I send that link out that's unique to that person, that identifies his or her actor. So an encrypted token that will go out and make sure when I take this course, I don't have to log in, but it still knows that the link that went to Duncan Welder is Duncan Welder's link. So being able to pass that over and send that text message out. And then we built some additional tools around reminder frequency and when messages go out, because people don't want messages coming out at midnight, or they don't want messages coming out on Saturday and Sunday a lot of times, and holidays. So we can go in and set, or they can go in and set days for allowing or disallowing messages, or the links to these courses. And the other thing that is a little different or unique about it is that there are rules to enforce spacing between content modules. So I can have one message go out today, and if you finish that content today, it might wait 3 days, it might be 5 days to send that next message. So what I was going to do is just take a quick look here in the browser for that space learning platform. I've already jumped to activity. I shouldn't show you that first. But basically what we did is, even though we have a full LMS that can do this, they didn't need that, right? So this is really stripped down to be a very simple kind of learning experience platform where I can load students, courses into the into the application. Sorry. Managed to time myself out.
Technical difficulties.
Always. All right. So load courses to the system, right? So I can import a CMI5 course. If you notice up here, I'm going to open up a course just to pretend that I'm pretending that I'm editing it, but very little information. I don't have to load a ton of data here to get the course in and going. And again, let me open one up that has multiple elements. You can see different modules over the course of time. So a couple xAPI packages, an evaluation, a certificate there. And then I can track activity, right? So I can report specifically on people, but if I want to look at a slice of messages, I can change my time frame there at the top, and I have text messages sent, email sent, because if the system runs into a person that does not have a mobile phone number in the system, it will switch over to sending an email, and then you can see the number of completions by text, is that green bar there, and completions via email is that yellow bar that's going to be at the very bottom, and then overall launches, so the number of times people have gone and actually run those courses. And again, truly, wasn't a request to have anything xAPI enabled. We said, gosh, if you want to, if you want to send these messages out and have it, and have it work bypassing the LMS and not have to do anything strange, we've got to get away from SCORM and use a more modern system. So with that, and I can, certainly, I'm going to hit all these at a high level, but we could certainly. Don't start from the beginning. I want to start from right where I am. There we go.
And
get more information on those. All right, there we go.
The next challenge that we faced was a customer. They're a petrochemical company. They were a lot more interested in mastery of objectives than they were in people passing courses, which is good. That's what we believe as well. And they needed the ability to drill down to questions and try to find problems. They were experiencing some issues in a particular area and wanted to deliver more training and better training in order to improve the issues that they were having, and we'll take a look at that. In their case, they wanted to give reports to supervisors on those issues to show that they were either making progress or not. And they were working primarily with SCORM content that had an embedded test. They were requiring a 70% to pass, which in this particular instance I think was a bad idea. And they had very limited item analysis, and there was no tieback in SCORM between the learning objectives and the testing that was going on inside of SCORM. So this is one of the things that was causing problems. And what happened is they ended up developing some dashboards. And why don't we look at this live instead of looking at it in PowerPoint? Sure. So
you can kill the SOP.
Yeah. Where did my Outlook go? Outlook died. More technical difficulties. So we'll pull up Power BI here. This was actually the solution that we came up with for them in this particular case, because they needed to include data that was in xAPI. They needed to include some data that was in the LMS proper, and they need to include data from some external systems. So this is their opening dashboard. This is Power BI, Microsoft product. And one of the nice things about Power BI is it can pull data from multiple sources and include that in one single dashboard. So up at the top, the circles you see is xAPI data, as well as the information on the top at the right with the registrations, the number of those that are instructor-led, the number that are self-study registrations, and the number of completions. In the middle, there's data from a safety reporting system. It's actually two safety reporting systems, right? And it tracks observations, incidents, and so on. And what they were trying to do was trend their safety incidents down. Good idea. And they thought, well, we'll just do some training and it will get better. Well, they did some training. You can see the activity down here, which is also xAPI data. They tried it out for a few days to see if they had any improvement, or a few weeks, and they didn't. And they were trying to figure out why. They thought their training would be effective, and it just wasn't. Well, one of the things that we discovered was that their learning objectives were not being tracked very effectively, so it was hard to make improvement in the training. For example, let's look at this one. Right-click, go through 2 questions. We'll look at this one objective. And what we see here is that there were 3 associated questions with this. And one of the questions appears to be the one that's causing the problem the most for students. What we also found was they were taking multiple attempts in order to answer the question correctly. And so what this led us to study is the test question bad? That's your first thought. No, the test question didn't appear to be wrong. But they weren't really training what they thought they were training in their e-learning with their current SCORM content. So this kind of drill down capability was provided by xAPI and was very important to find the actual issues that were going on with the training and make improvements. Now, one thing I want to point out here is see the bar at the bottom. It's maybe hard to see the label, but it says unknown. Anybody take a guess at that? Probably can't chat back at me while I've got this up, but the answer is it's SCORM content. Although SCORM does allow you to put objectives into SCORM itself, I've actually yet to see a single authoring tool that takes advantage of that. In addition, even in the SCORM specification, there is no tie between particular parts of the content and the objectives. The objectives are just kind of sitting there, which is why the content tools probably don't address it. So the solution in this particular case was to go back and redesign the training a little bit. Some of it was converted to xAPI, where we really needed to track the objective, and we could do so. We actually used a CMI5 best practice and followed that with just plain xAPI data in order to get the objective associated with the question. And now we were getting a better picture of what was going on in the field. And as you can see in the middle chart here, their trend line is now down. So they did make a real impact by using a combination of xAPI data and data from their safety systems to do that comparison and figure out how they could make an impact. So it was a real success story for them. I'll jump back.
So one of the other things there is Power BI was their internal tool, so there was really no real cost outside of the business processes that had to be updated, but they didn't really incur any additional software cost, and they already had in-house expertise for doing that integration.
Yeah, in fact, they developed a lot of their own visualizations, and one of the important factors for them was because they're tied to LMS data in there as well, they were able to figure out who the supervisors were of individual employees, so they could send them a weekly report that shows only their employees with the same kind of charts and data, ability to export to Excel, etc.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, an important point that we'll bring up in a couple of these visualizations that we'll see. There is a combination of both xAPI data and LMS data, primarily to organize employees. The LMS already knows that I belong to this department and this person's my supervisor. When you could store that in an agent profile with xAPI, but we already have a data source, so there's no real reason to do that. Plus, it changes all the time. And I think of those things then, agent and state. I've come up with the other. Anyway, state as things that don't necessarily change day in and day out.
Yeah, it's not efficient to store that kind of information there.
So the next challenge, and this is actually
hey Duncan and Art, before we move on, there are a few questions in the chat that I want to tee up.
Oh, please, yeah.
Yep. So one is asking if you could share an example of how you associate objective with e-learning content or assessment.
Okay. If you go to the CMI5 website, there's on the top there's a menu, and it's got best practices, and it gives specifics. But basically, what happens is in the context, in the parent part of the context of a statement, we put in an identifier for the objective.
Thank you. And then, do any authoring tools support learning objectives associated with xAPI?
Yes, I believe we actually worked with Domino a little bit on that project, and Domino Flow at the time, I think it's called Domino 1 now, allowed for the association of objectives with the statements that it generates.
Awesome. And the final question, which I think you answered when you talked through the objectives, but this is from Helen. When you mentioned issues drilling down to the question level, did the issues relate to learning gap issues?
Yes. Essentially, the performance checklists that were filled out by supervisors showed that the students were not performing in the way that they were supposedly being trained to perform. Is that correct assessment?
Yeah, and I think they also ran into some issues where they had they had to do some content updates, right? They found that not only were some of their questions not good, there are objectives that should have been covered that didn't, that might have been discussed in the content, but weren't evaluated, weren't tested on. So, they had to do some process updates there to get, things to more accurately assess whether or not someone had mastered that objective.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure thing. So this is the case that I said no, we don't want to do that. So these guys are in the power generation distribution industry, so super heavily regulated. They had this massive volume of essentially PDF and Word documents that they had for training. Their traditional path had been like having 100 people show up at a Holiday Inn conference room, and they have a 3-inch binder, and they're going through these materials. They wanted to get rid of that, eliminate that problem, and were concerned about USBs from a control standpoint. They wanted to have some document control, but they also wanted students to be able to mark up those documents, and then when they went back home, have access to all of their notes and markups, even though they didn't physically have a copy of the file. So they did. They came in and said, we need a PDF viewer that writes xAPI statements. No. You need an ebook, right? Because these functions are much more natively capable there. So I said no, but the problem is we have all these thousands and thousands of pages that we have to do something with. We're not going to convert them to an ebook format. So, okay, so what we did is we built actually two annotators. One is a browser-based annotator that will open up a PDF. The LMS handles credentialing, and then I can go in and modify, update information inside that PDF while I'm at a computer in a training room. Then I go back home and I open up that PDF, and because all of the annotations are stored in the Learning Records store, then they just get applied on top of my document, right? And I can move back and forth, and all these notes pass with me, but I can't get to content that hasn't been approved for me through the learning management system. And I am not on a Apple device, so I am going to make a quick switch over here to the. Oh, go ahead. Give me. I think it's another one. I thought we had one open there. There it is. To this PDF annotator, and this is again not a not a sexy example, but PDFs rarely are. At least the Apple version, I have to tell you, is a little bit prettier on the screen. But basically here they want the ability to highlight something. I can go in and change the color of those highlights. I could underline, like you see here, or I can, of course, highlight and add notes, where I put in information and save it, or I can just directly add a note there, right inside the document. So go through each of these markups are essentially a series of points, right? Points of reference over the document, because the PDF is just a picture versus an actual ebook. So when the document gets opened or reopened inside the annotator, again, it pulls all those notes over with me. And the other thing that's kind of a benefit there is that the reporting from the administrative portal will let you see page views, documents that have been opened and not opened, comments. Now, some of that data they aggregate so that they're not capturing student information, and then others is more, I think more person-specific kind of data there. So another example, and this one is one too that I always like looking at because we had a bit of a design glitch there. Didn't think about needing to be able to get back to thumbnails of all these documents. So after about 300,000 statements had been written, we had to go back in and void those 300,000 statements with 300,000 more statements, and then add updated statements for which brought us up to 900,000 statements from one little oversight and sending statements that didn't include all of the context information that we needed.
Yeah, it's a good example of a failure that we turned around into a success. That you really need to design your data first, but that's a whole nother session.
And I have a few more questions around the PDF annotator. One is around, is it an extension on top of PDF JavaScript library?
It is. There's I don't remember the exact tool that was used, but it's a script library that is displaying PDFs, and then we have an overlay on it where we position the annotations.
Awesome. And then I think you answered this one, but each interaction generated an xAPI statement.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Into the opening of the document, track every page that gets viewed, and we track the closing of the document as well.
Yeah. We didn't use it as an example here, but everything that happens inside the learning management system provides an xAPI statement. A supervisor approves an employee to attend a class, or somebody searches for fire extinguisher training. So we capture all of those things.
It's all captured.
Thank you.
Sure. So here's our next example, and this was around usage of forums. We needed for a client for forum activity to be tracked. When people contributed to a forum, we wanted to be able to show if they got their answer voted up. We wanted to be able to show if they got their answer voted down, if they got marked correct, or as the accepted answer by the forum moderator, which is usually the instructor of the particular session associated with that forum. And we needed to be able to report that to supervisors because this company that wanted this project felt that the social learning aspect, felt strongly that the social learning aspect was a very important part of the training class, and forums were integrated with every one of their both live learning classes as well as their e-learning with an instructor as moderator, excuse me. So it was important that they have that data and be able to deliver it to supervisors, and they wanted it delivered in a very visual way. Because they didn't think supervisors would just read a report talking about forum data. It wasn't particularly sexy. So again, I think I'll just jump over and show you. It's a lot cooler live. So this is the forum report that we developed. And the students that report to a particular supervisor are showing on the screen, the ones that have contributed. There's actually a way to show non-contributors as well. I don't want to do that right here because it will fill the screen with all of the non-contributors. And then the links going to the messages, you can see the lines vary in their thickness. For example, this line here between Richard, who's actually Duncan, and the competencies forum is very thick because he's made several contributions. You can see there he's had an accepted answer once, he's been upvoted once, and replied to 8 different posts. Now for supervisors, this might be a very important quality to know, because if somebody's getting their answers marked as accepted or upvoted, maybe they're a subject matter expert. So that kind of information can provide real quick hits for supervisors if they're looking for somebody to help out as a subject matter expert. And if the line is thin, then there have been very few contributions. Because this data is also tied, it's not only LRS data, but because it's integrated in the LMS and LRS in this case are tightly integrated. It's one system. So there's the ability, for example, for a supervisor to filter by the groups that they supervise and then see different activities for different groups of people. There's also the ability to group the data, so we could group by department, for example. And when it updates, there it goes. So when it updates, we can see the larger circles are the departments that have contributed the most. The smaller circles are the ones that have contributed the least. And I can also, again, as I said, show non-contributors. And so there's only one department, and that none means that department is missing a name in the database. But so the group by ability lets them look sort of at a high-level overview of all the groups that they supervise and see who's working in this area and who's not, who's contributing and who's not. And maybe it's something they want to talk to department heads about or team heads and so on. So they have different options of grouping the data because it's LMS and LRS data all in one place.
All right, and actually, I said we can probably. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Did you want to stay back on the?
No, go ahead.
So this was actually a data design. Very important to have data design correct so that we could link people to topics, because one of the issues with forums is you're upvoting other people's contributions. So you've got a statement that is actually the target or the object of another statement. So we needed to...
We knew the train was coming, don't worry. It's fast.
It's the second time today we've had a presentation interrupted by a train. They didn't come yesterday at all, but naturally when we're presenting they come. So it was very important to be able to track the forum information in extensions, because we had to be able to get back to the person. And when an object of a statement is another statement, that can be a difficult issue. So data design was very, very critical in this project.
Yeah. Lots of roll up, this is a parent of this.
Yeah.
So, examples that we're going to take a look at. I'm going to do the first one here. It's really just around supervisor visualizations. So not driven necessarily by a specific want. I feel like it's difficult a lot of times to get someone to imagine what a data visualization would be, or what kind of information is even there to start putting together. So what we've done is gone through and here inside this learner portal, we have 3 different visualizations in this case, or 3 different sets of visualizations in this case, that focus on xAPI data, or based largely on xAPI data. So I was just showing you the forum activity. Lesson activity is another. So if we want to take a look at activity across a period of time, right? So here I'm just looking at October. These are different different activities. So failed test, passed test, checklist that was met or not met, failed and passed e-learning, and then lessons that have been waived, right? And I can, again, like the forum visualization, I can choose elements that get added here. I can also do some filtering, again, because we're tying in the LMS data to have the employee information. There's some basic formatting stuff, right? So I can move into different, a stacked graph versus a grouped graph. But again, just going out and taking a look at that LRS data, this is a relatively easy query to get. Right? I mean, you've got some different activity types, and those are the ones that I'm interested in, and put those out so you can easily see what is happening out there. I have lots of unmet checklists in the system, so I should apologize for that.
No problem. While we're waiting for that to load, or I have a few more questions from Solution 4 from the visualizations with grouping. Brian asks, are you able to share your context model and decision process? And then go ahead.
Yeah. Well, this is super documented, so we can for sure get you the profile information for the forums.
Oh, for the forums, yeah.
And then this question comes from Joel, and it's referring to challenge 3. Do you have the name of the annotator you were referencing?
Oh, that's
the annotator itself is our product. The library that it's developed on top of, I do not know off the top of my head, but I will be happy to find out, Jess, and I can give it to you for distribution.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, I'm sorry.
I was gonna just let you know it looks like the screen's still loading on our end.
Oh no. I did not realize. Do I need to try to reconnect?
Yeah.
Oh, what is it? What does this mean?
That just means it's not syncing with Google. I'm going to try stopping sharing and restarting it.
Okay, we're seeing your screen now. Yeah.
All right. So, let's say these are test dashboards that, again, going out, taking a look at the data inside the LRS, and you get some basic counts. No, this is all high-level data. This tests passed versus failed, and I can filter by different groups here. So if I want it's the admin department, I can see that it updates there. I know that's
100%. Huh? How about that?
But also, this is just distribution of scores. If that legend at the bottom is hard to see, it's 90 to 100, 80 to 89.99. And you can see the number of those tests, test questions, passed versus failed, and then most missed questions by objective, right? So looking at different objectives, and if I click down into that, I can say, well, that's only one question there. Here we go. So I've got some additional questions in that accident investigation objective that, in this case, have all been failed by this group.
That's not good.
No. And then I have average number or highest average number of attempts. So what tests are people taking more than once? So this sample test is it was a 1.3, and this Excel test, people are taking it normally twice to get through. And then, again, I have my time controls at the bottom. So if I want to look at a different window, I can make those updates. The other thing, like I said, neglected to mention on this screen earlier is you do have some control over things like your color themes and all of that. So if you have something that you like there, then great. But again, I don't know if the lesson activity had loaded before I bounced out there, but it's a very again, just showing those different types that I chatted through, failed test, passed test, and breaking that out of the LRS data. So I will pass that back to you, Art. The requirements I'm not neglecting. They're just not
really
based on
xAPI
any
data.
xAPI data.
Yeah. So these are some more visualizations, but these are targeted more at administrators. So this is all xAPI data on every tab except the requirements tab. So these are registrations. This is just a quick hit kind of thing for administrators where they're trying to get a feel for what's going on out in the learning world. They can actually filter this to look at particular departments or work areas that if they want to. There's an option to export the graphs if you want to. There's also a lot of there's options on some of the other pages where you can export the data directly to Excel. So here's registrations as well as completions, the green lines being completions. And then there's more totals down at the bottom. Registrations by media type, and they can pick and choose which ones they want to include in the chart if they're trying to see how are we doing with our online learning versus how we're doing with classroom-based learning. They could just put those two choices and only see the data for that. There's not a lot of no-show rate here because it's a demo system. We just had one big pile of no-shows in July. You might think possibly that's COVID related before everything got switched over. So that's all xAPI data. Then there's just kind of a general activity chart that shows you over a range of dates what kind of activity types, the activity type in an xAPI statement that's going on. You can see there's a lot of CMI interactions, the pink ones, because the LMS does have a testing feature, and all of that is being written out as CMI interactions, as it should be. You can also have activity by department, so you can see are different departments doing their training or not. Do some of them not do any training, which is always possible. And you can, again, filter by that. And then here's an example of data that you can export to Excel. These are other demographics, doing it by work area as opposed to department. So this can be location, and again, has filters on it. This one is actually really interesting on the course activity, because what we're seeing here is that there's a lot of registrations in this time period and not a whole lot of completions. So that's probably something that you could probably find out from your LMS, but we write all that information to a learning record store. It's really a little bit easier to report on and see. So this is kind of interesting information for an admin that they would probably not normally see or even go looking for. And this has to do with course ratings. In the demo system, I think there's probably not a lot of ratings. We also put scheduled information out to the LRS. So this shows us a number of scheduled classes that we have, and then the number of registrations in each one of those classes. One of the more interesting things that we're getting out of the xAPI data, though, is utilization. If we schedule a class for 20 people and only 5 show up, then both the classroom utilization and the instructor's utilization are not particularly good. So we might want to combine classes or consider another delivery method. Now, obviously, during COVID, these rates are way down as everything moves into an online world. And we already showed the space learning dashboard, so I won't bore you with that again. And the requirements dashboard, again, it's not really xAPI data.
Yeah, I think it's a good point that you was thinking about it when you looked at the registrations. The only reason you can get things like a no-show rate is because you're capturing with xAPI data that I registered for this class, or my supervisor registered me, or an administrator, whatever the path is. Somehow I got registered for the class, but then I never get a corresponding history record. So,
yeah, that's right. Or an instructor instructor can mark you as literally a no-show.
Sure.
And that gets written into xAPI, so we're able to get charts and data that we just couldn't get before, for the most part, without jumping through a lot of hoops with xAPI.
All right, so
I think we're right.
Glad to answer any additional questions or anything that that we can do. Again, our contact info there, and if you want, there's not a lot of meat in this presentation, but everyone's certainly welcome to it. And with that, anything else in the chat there?
I'm not seeing any questions in the chat right now, but I'm gonna. You have the contact information, and I'm gonna transition back to our PowerPoint as we get ready for the team updates. If you wanted to hang around and be if anybody had questions in the chat, and then you could maybe respond in the chat if some things came up that didn't get answered, if that works okay with you.
I will stay through the team updates.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Those were so rich. Thank you for sharing all of those cases. And I'll share out the slide deck with our cohort when we send out the team update, and I'll follow up on some of the profiles we talked about today.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
So I'm going to hop into our team updates for this week. We have some listed on GitHub and some that were not in GitHub. So those of you who are giving your updates, and that said me, our producers will be giving you mic rights right now. I am going to call on teams in alphabetical order. So if your team is green, or if I saw some teams in the chat, I'll be calling on those first and then going down. And I am going to share my screen now. So we have Team Down Under, who is not able to be here because they're sleeping. Some of the updates that they have this week is that they welcome some new teams, some new members to the team. So that's awesome. Welcome, Ken and Nicole. They form subgroups for the technical code and instructional design. The team has met with the CFA to learn more about how the application can assist volunteer firefighting in Australia. And they're working with the CFA to liaison with them in order to create their app. So they have lots of updates in here around what they're doing with instructional design and what they're creating in their apps. And if you want to be a part of this team and help build an app that is going to marry emergency services with real-time data, emergency services real-time data with geolocation check-ins in xAPI, go ahead and join that team in Slack. So the next team I'm going to tee up is Team Early Childhood Education, and I believe I saw Joanne here, but she's not available to speak this week, so I'll give her update for her. They're continuing to explore the standards, activities, and verbs related to nature play statements, and they're working with Team Pebble to get InDesign plugin installed. They're going to continue to work on the prototype in Twine. So if you're interested in learning more about creating an app that's going to track some nature play for early childhood children, go ahead and join that team. I'm sure that Joanne would really love the support. I'm going to go back to our team. We have Team HR Open Standards. Is anyone on? Jim, are you on the line to give that update? So they don't have a lot of update this week. They're still working on their use cases, and they're moving their first iteration through their first iteration. There's not much that has changed last week, but they're still working on that. All right. Team Zoom. Is there anyone from Team Zoom to give an update today? I know that they've been meeting and sharing. Is Brian, I think I saw Brian on the line. Brian, are you able to give your update? All right. So there, hey, Brian, are you going to give Team Zoom update? Or are you here for Team Makey Makey?
I'm here for Team Makey Makey, but Brian Wanzer, I want to say, just mentioned that there's no update from Team Zoom today. We sort of conversed and took the week off because we all had conflicts with our regular meeting time.
Perfect. Thanks, Brian. I see that in chat now. So we'll go. And then, Jem, did you want me to hop back over for your update? I see that you.
Yeah, it came on. I don't know what I wasn't muted before, but thank you for giving me a chance, Jess.
No
I just added in the chat. So we're working on this week. We're focusing on the individual learner wallet, the transfer of assessment data that's available for individual learners or candidates, and we're focusing on what's being defined by the T3 initiative. And we're building that into our use case, and we've got it written up. We're going to go over that use case as a team tomorrow. So it's really exciting, pretty cool that we're not just focusing on assessments for customers, but we're looking at that individual data. That's been a interesting topic for such a long time. So we're working on that this week. We'll work on some more next week. I won't be here next week for the update, but we'll make sure we get an update in Slack and in GitHub.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. All right.
Welcome.
Brian, you can go ahead for Team Makey Makey.
Okay, and I'm sort of dual role. I can also support Jim Elder by providing that update next week. So Team Makey Makey, we were able to do some querying this week, and I built a working URL that's listed there in the GitHub discussions area, and then you see a screen grab from it. So I'm actually going out to our LRS, which at this point is StormCloud, pulling the existing data and then summarizing it through JavaScript. So the sample image of results shows how many of the different statements that we're querying against we were able to summarize. As far as what we hope to accomplish next week, we're looking at updates to this and further editing and publications for added videos. And areas where we need support, there's actually a bit of a bug in the JavaScript. So one of the things it does is below the summary is it pulls up all the statements. It's actually publishing that list of statements twice. So I'm going to go back and do some revision of that JavaScript code and see if I can find it. But I'm just suggesting if somebody has 10, 15 minutes that has a little more JavaScript experience than I do, it would help me tremendously to have another pair of eyes to look at it and see where I might have an extra curly bracket or one that I need to remove or replace. That kind of eyeball experience helps. Thanks, Jess.
No problem. You have a question, Brian. Is this using the Learning Locker LRS?
No, I mentioned it's using StormCloud.
Okay.
But the code is actually driven through the ADL's xAPI wrapper JavaScript library. So it'll work independently of the LRS. You'd be able to use it for any LRS.
Awesome.
It's just a matter of putting your credentials in the right file. And I actually found that with that wrapper, I'm sorry to go on, but with that wrapper, I could replace credentials by replacing just a single JavaScript file. Once the credentials were stored and it was working on another URL, I was able to copy that file over and jump to StormCloud from a different learning LRS. So Learning Locker would probably not be hard to connect to.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
All right. Team Pebble. Is Kristen on the line to give the update for Team Pebble? All right. Well, or is Judy? I think I saw Judy then. Oh, there's
Oh, it
Kristen.
might be working now. Is it
Hello,
working?
Kristen. Yep, I
It
see you.
always takes like a minute. I need to be more prepared. Okay, so our update is pretty short. Judy and I chatted about the specific use case. We just didn't want to build anything until we knew the actual use case that we're building for, like good instructional designers. So we kind of imagine the Pebble book, the ebook, being for someone who has signed up for the cohort. They get an email, and the email links to the ebook and says you can either go through this or you can join us at our first meeting and we'll go through similar information. And that way we can have an ebook that adapts to that situation, to further test this idea of how do you design something that tracks participation in something that's done either asynchronously or synchronously and ties everything together in the same dashboard and the same reporting structure. So you have all that together. So that is our use case. I know Judy has been working on that. So hopefully early next week, not to put any time in Judy's mouth, early next week, we'll just send that around and ask people to play around with it to get some results and to get some feedback on it.
Awesome. Thank you. And you
Thank
are
you.
such good instructional designers, Judy. All right. So I am going team storyline engagement. Is there anyone on the line to give an update from there? Sharon, are you on the line? Go ahead, Sharon. I see it. You updated it in.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Not a lot to update. Last week for some of us was our annual conference. So yesterday was the last day. So just getting back into things. Matt built and sent a statement using Storm Cloud. Him and I have been chatting this last couple of hours. We're able to set up the Versity LRS account. Spent time with Jason last week. Areas where the team needs support. Just meeting with Jason for next week, either Tuesday or Wednesday. And Jason, if you're still on, let me know if that's Central Time. I can't remember where you're located, so we could set that up to get the team introduced to the Versity LRS. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Sharon. All righty. So I think we've gone through all of the teams for the weekly updates. So I'm just gonna end with some good stuff to know. Cohort meetings are here every week at 2:00 p.m. We're using our Kaltura Neuro room. Next week, we have a panel conversation on HR Open, LER Hub, and Caliper with Jason and Kim. And then we have our xAPI party is open for registration. We also have our call for proposals. So if you're interested in presenting, which is a great opportunity professionally to network, you can submit that. The link is there. It's also in the weekly update that goes to you every week. And our spring cohort signups have opened. So if you go to xapicohort.com, you can sign up for spring 2021 if you're interested. As always, if you would have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to email me or message me in Slack. With that, have an awesome Thursday. We're right at time. Now get out there and keep making things.